Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. 1 2 3. 1 2 3. Test. Test 1 2.
Bring it up.
Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't affect my levels, so that's good. Press the button. Depress it when check, check.
I keep thinking he's going to come back to California, but he's had a really, there's a lot of technology in Austin. Yeah. So
And if he's
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. We will call this meeting to order at 10:05 a.m. And if we can get a roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Escobedo. I'll go ahead and take roll call. Starting with Historic Landmark Commissioners, I have Chair Grumbine,
Present.
Vice Chair House,
Here.
Commissioner Butler,
Here?
Commissioner Dordan, Commissioner Drury,
Here.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Here.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Here.
Commissioner Manuel,
Here.
Commissioner Uli, and then our Planning Commission commissioners, I have Chair Escobedo,
Here.
Vice Chair Bonderson,
Here.
Commissioner Bauke,
Here?
Commissioner Higgins,
Here.
Commissioner Lodge,
Here.
Commissioner Wardlow,
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. And so we move on to preliminary matters, and we will open up public comment for members of the public that would like to give public comment for items that are not on today's agenda. Do we have any speaker slips?
Not for items not on this agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will close general public comment, and we will move on to today's discussion item, which is the State Street Master Plan process. The Historic Landmarks Commission and Planning Commission will jointly receive a presentation on the State Street Master Plan and discuss the past, present, and future condition of State Street. And we have Ms. Harris here to give a presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. It's really wonderful to be here today. My name is Tess Harris. I'm the State Street Master Planner with the City of Santa Barbara. With me today, I have Timmy Bolton, who's a project planner working on the State Street Master Plan, as well as Mukul Malhotra, who's with MIG, the consulting team that the city's working with today. I just want to really start out by emphasizing defining the project and really emphasizing what the master plan is. So the master plan is a visioning document. We are really planning for the future. So we're emphasizing and thinking about what the next 30 to 50 years for our city is going to look like in downtown. To be successful in the long term, we need to think beyond closing the street and beyond outdoor dining. Those two things have brought about a remarkable success for our downtown, but we also want to think bigger. What can this new public space, a space for people, bring to our downtown core? And how can we use it in a way that makes downtown a place that people want to be regardless of the activity they're doing or the time of day that it is? We also have created opportunities by closing the street for businesses to expand. And we want to think about how we can create a future space for businesses and the community, and a space that the community wants to be a part of. Not just a space, not just building for what is there currently today, but what could be there in the future. Put simply, this is a downtown placemaking and public space plan. We're looking at the location of it is between Sola Street and the 101 underpass and Chapala and Anacapa streets. Just want to highlight on this map, this is the project boundary. Many unique opportunities here. This map highlights the various paseos in our downtown core. It also highlights some of the historical elements that we have in the downtown area. I also want to highlight that there are other existing projects that the city is currently undertaking, such as the De La Guerra Plaza, the Library Plaza, the Farmers Market relocation, and the undercrossing on the 101. This is a recognition just that the plan needs to speak to the various different projects and then also speak to our community at large and recognize that we want to reach people all over. And while this is a plan with this specific boundary area, this plan is also really touching our community, regardless of location in the city. It also complements other areas such as the waterfront and the funk zone. And so now I want to get into why we're doing a master plan. So we've been talking about a pedestrian-focused or people-focused space downtown for quite some time. And in fact, there's a sentence in the 1964 general plan that talks about a pedestrianized area in the downtown core for shopping. Really, it's been back since the 60s that we've had this conversation, and COVID really highlighted and brought us the opportunity to think about closing the space and thinking about the long-term visioning for our downtown. In As of May 2020, we did close the street as a response to COVID to help businesses expand and then also allow community members to congregate and enjoy the space without vehicles. Our emergency ordinance took effect and then was followed up by an economic recovery ordinance. That ordinance expires at the end of 2023. And both of those have allowed us to experiment and test in the downtown area in different ways. We'll continue to do that throughout the project. And this project will really build upon the testing and the piloting that we're doing and look at the future. We want to be intentional and think about the way that the space can be utilized. And so now I want to turn it over to Mr. Bolton, who will talk about what the master plan will include.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. So this slide shows the 4 primary components of the State Street Master Plan. First and foremost, fundamental to the success of this effort is that it's tailored to the unique characteristics of Santa Barbara and that it reflects our community's visions and values, which can only truly be accomplished through an extensive and inclusive public engagement process that reaches all corners of our community. The first building block of this effort is the existing conditions analysis, and what that will do is set the foundation for the plan and future analysis and set the baseline context through a series of targeted study and technical analysis of a variety of topics like economics, transportation, stormwater, and utilities. The next step is to work with the community and these commissions to develop a so-called urban design framework. And I think this is what most folks really have in mind when they think of the State Street Master Plan. It's the thing that sets the overarching vision for the space. How is it used? What does it look like? What types of improvements are needed to be made? Those types of things, and it will all culminate in a series of conceptual designs for each block. And then ultimately, a plan's only useful if there's a strategy to actually implement its components. So a critical element to all of this is developing a so-called implementation plan, which will identify things like, how do we go about funding? What will the phasing of implementation be? What are the near-term easy wins we can do to make this place successful, both in the near term and the long term, as well as how are the operational components of this going to work? What are the roles and responsibilities, and how can we make this thing successful into the future? So this slide shows here the topics that Council directed us to tackle as part of this effort. For the sake of time, I'm not going to run through all of these, but I simply want to highlight that the scope of this effort is quite broad in nature, and it spans things like the specific street state, what's the urban design, what type of activities there are, what are the land uses, what are the improvements, how do these things all relate to one another, to things like how does housing fit into this conversation, and how can we leverage the city's rich architectural heritage and the beauty of El Pueblo Viejo in a new and exciting way. And then also, how does State Street as a corridor fit into the overall transportation network of the city? And then I want to take a moment here just to reiterate that at the end of the day, the State Street Master Plan, it will not be city staff's plan, it cannot be the consultant's plan, but it must be the community's plan. And the way to ensure that this is the case is to provide ample opportunity for these commissions as well as the community at large to really dig into this process and help shape a brighter and better downtown for all. And we really hope that these commissions as well as the community at large really participate throughout that process. So to that end, there is a council-created advisory committee comprised of members of council as well as a member from each of this commission. So thank you to Mr. Lindvik as well as Ms. Bonderson for participating in that. There are also 10 members of the community at large as part of that group. We anticipate having at least 9 public meetings as part of that group throughout this process to get their feedback and direction. Today is the first of at least 3 joint meetings we'd like to hold between these 2 commissions to really leverage your expertise and critical experience in these areas to make this plan the best that it can be. There will also be 3 check-in meetings with council at important junctures in this to get their feedback and just provide general updates. And finally, there will be 5 of what we're calling community engagement windows, and this is something that will be covered later in the presentation, but is really one of the exciting components of the community engagement process as part of this. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to McCool from MIG to go over some more details about the community engagement process, as well as how we'll wrap this all up by early 2024.
Thank you, Timmy. So, my name is Mukul Malhotra. This is, I work for MIG. MIG is a planning and design firm and the lead consultant for this project. This is a great opportunity for us to learn and listen from all of you as we go about doing this project. We, as part of our team, we also have strategic economics on our team, and they will provide the economic development analysis as well as different improvements or suggestions that will be incorporated in the overall plan. In addition, we also have Fair and Peers who will be helping us with multimodal improvements that will be integrated in the overall framework of the plan. As Tess already mentioned, the project area is essentially from Anacapa to Chapala, and then Sola to 101 underpass. We will be focusing on State Street, but it is a network of open spaces, and we will be considering all 20 blocks as we go ahead, looking at how to create an overall plan for the State Street area. Overall, our approach for this project builds on everything that Tess and Timmy said, but also keeps into account that we do build it on a very strong foundation of economic strategy that meaningfully integrates various ideas that are generated by the community at large, that helps us create different placemaking opportunities as well as different activities that we want to see at different times of the day, different times of the year, and constantly integrates community feedback to refine the different ideas that will be developed over the course of the project. This in turn will help us create the great street that we all have heard the community so far tell us that the city and its community deserves. In terms of just big picture, we are clearly hearing, and I'm just going to share some of the projects that MIG, the MIG team has worked on, is we have clearly heard from the community the need for Great Street to be experiential for a wide variety of uses and activities, ensure that they are accessible for people of all ages, incomes, as well as abilities, and especially keep in mind the children who should be an equal participant and user of the street. It needs to be sustainable. There are great opportunities for this project to integrate green infrastructure, stormwater management into the overall design that then in turn contributes to the overall character and strengthens the sense of identity. And we have also clearly heard the need to be flexible. What State Street is during the week, in the morning during a weekday, is different than what it is on a weeknight or a weekend or even on special events. So the need for the street to be flexible to accommodate different uses, different opportunities, different activities is a key integral part of what we are hearing and want to hear more from the community. And then State Street has such beautiful stories to tell. We want to make sure that's a key component in the overall improvements that the community and other folks are thinking about as we look at different improvements for the project area. We have constantly heard the desire for State Street to be a world-class destination that is designed for the local people. And as we all know, if you design it for the locals and it's a great space, it attracts all the tourists too. That's a hallmark of all great streets. This is an example in Nueva Street in downtown San Antonio, where we have been working for the last 10, 12 years. As you know, it's one of the most historic cities. More than 300 years ago, it started as Yanaguana, and it had a number of challenges working with the community, integrating ideas that the community said in terms of different type of multimodal improvements they would like to see, how the street can change its character and accommodate different uses over different times of the day as well as the year. And through the planning process, it helped create a foundation for the city to go after funding sources to actually implement. And this is what you begin to see in different parts of downtown, which is allowing for a wide variety of activities to happen all through the year. Tess and Timmy have already talked about the foundation that we have to build upon. Clearly, with the clear city council visioning principles that have been articulated to revitalize downtown, ensure it's a safe experience for all users of the street, and ensure economic revitalization so that it can be people-centric while still facilitating housing within downtown. It is so essential that we recapture and reestablish downtown's identity and bring even more people to downtown, and last but not the least, design it for locals. Building on the City Council's overall visioning principles, it helps us create what has been discussed in the past about overall objectives and goals that include creating a sense of place with not just the historic fabric, which is such a strong foundation, but also with the wonderful stories that this place has to tell and share with people who use the street. Reimagining how people of all abilities travel, identify solutions that improves the vitality of state, emphasizing experiential and outdoor uses, especially for the underutilized spaces, and learn from the past and approach issues holistically, and we would love to hear that from you, ensuring we recapture and reestablish downtown's identity that integrates housing and recognizes critical infrastructure to support a thriving business and pedestrian-centric downtown. Timmy already mentioned that we are keeping into account a very robust engagement strategies. We may be doing some workshops in the middle of the street, so we hope to see some, if not all of you, take part in these workshops along with the other community members. We would like to go to the people as expect to just people come to us, so that we can have a wide, diverse set of conversations. In addition to having community design charrettes, meeting with business owners, stakeholders, people who live and work in the area, and not forgetting the kids and the groups who have been typically not included in the engagement process. We want to make sure we are making a very special effort to including them through a wide variety of events, be it on the ground or along the corridor edges, that then complements different online forums, be it community meetings or surveys that we are envisioning would happen in both English and Spanish. There'll be both in-person surveys as well as online surveys that will help us map improvements that the community would like to see all along the corridor, but also in each and every block too. Timmy already mentioned the overall project schedule, so I'll just very briefly go through it. We are at the very beginning of the project, and we are doing the existing conditions and starting to do the visioning, but we are in the process of gathering data and listening to what people who know this project so well, what they think about it. And that is why, as you can see, we are here for our first of three combined historic landmark and planning commission meetings. This will then help us come up with an overall survey, a community survey that will then create the foundation for the overall vision for the area, as well begin to identify what are the different activities and uses they would like to see in downtown. That in turn helps us create an urban design framework that is the community's vision and helps us start to explore emerging community-based and people-centric ideas within the area. That will go through a series of iterative processes, working with stakeholders, community members, and other folks to refine these ideas that then helps us create an implementation framework. Before we do the implementation framework, our intent is to come back to you all and also start to brainstorm and discuss what were the emerging ideas and what should be refined further as we go along this process. And then at the very end, as we are coming up with the public draft, with the refined concepts and ideas and improvement concepts, we will again come back to you all to listen what you all think and how we make sure that the public draft that is then presented to the City Council has the backing of the community. And as we go into the discussion, we do want to make sure we hear from you what is working, what is not working, what do you like, what you don't like also, and what do you hope to see as part of this planning process that we designed for the future, and definitely one thing you all would like to accomplish. And with that, I'm going to request Tess to talk about involvement.
Thank you, McCool. So how can all of you get involved? There's a number of different ways to get involved and stay up to date on what the master planning process is looking like. We hope that you'll subscribe to our email list. You can find that on our website. You're also more than welcome to email us directly, and the email is up there, State Street Master Plan at santabarbaraca.gov. I've also left my business card at the back of the table, and that has my email address as well, so you can email me directly that way too. We have a number of upcoming community events and meetings. So the State Street Advisory Committee meeting, the next meeting will be October 27th. We also have our first community meeting window, which will be November 3rd and 4th, out on State Street at a vacant storefront, likely on the 1200 block or the 900 block. We'll have a lot more information coming out about those events on those 2 days. And then staff will also be out in the community, both on State Street weekly and then out at other community groups and events outside of State Street and outside of the downtown core. Really, we want to engage people where they're at and meet people where they are. So if you have a group or an event that you want us to come to, please get in touch, and we'd love to be there for that. And so with that, we'll close staff's presentation. In a moment, we'll take public comment. I just wanted to highlight that if anybody would like to make public comment, if you could fill out a speaker slip and then pass it along to Ms. Kokinda or Ms. DeBusk, who are on the side of the room, and they'll make sure to get it up. And then we have a podium there as well for public comment.
And just as a order, after public comment, we'll have questions from the commissioners. And then we'll roll into our discussion, and everyone's going to get 2 minutes to make comments, and then we're going to discuss all the brilliant ideas that were said.
And Mr. Chair, through you, just for members of the public and all of the commissioners, please make sure to speak into your microphones very close so that everybody in the back can hear.
One more question: are we going to have online public comment as well, or is it only in person?
Yes, commissioners, we will have online as well as in-person comment.
All right, thank you, Chair Grumbine and Chair Escobedo. I'll go ahead and start with online public comment to allow enough time for anyone in the audience to fill out a speaker slip. So if you're joining via Zoom and you would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand and I will call on you. Just I'll give that one moment. All right, I'm not seeing any raised hands on Zoom, so I'll go ahead and start with in-person comment. First, we'll have Molly Pearson, and then after Ms. Pearson, we'll have Ann Peterson.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Hi. I realize I only have 2 minutes. I have a lot to say, but I'll make it brief. I'm a city resident. I've been here for over 30 years. I'm a former air quality professional, and I'm someone who walks, rides bikes, drives a car, and all that regularly here in the city. So State Street was previously a safe thoroughfare for cars, pedestrians, and bikes. And over the decades, it's functioned as a safe and convenient thoroughfare for bikes accessing the downtown area. In the current configuration, I know through firsthand experience, that's no longer the case. Bikes and pedestrians are not compatible on State Street, and it's no longer a good route for cyclists that are trying to get somewhere. So bikes, e-bikes, and wheeled devices are a big part of the city's transportation future. More and more women, children, and families are finding ways to use these devices to get around instead of using a car. So if State Street remains closed, if that thoroughfare is being taken away from the community, then the surrounding streets really must be altered so that bicycles can travel safely in the downtown area. In my mind, that means adding dedicated bike lanes to both Anacapa and Chapala Street, but I imagine that your skilled professionals may have other solutions. I also hope that you continue to seek input from the community, and especially the folks that aren't able to or don't feel comfortable accessing this meeting format. Thank you for your time and for your continued efforts to make this process both effective and inclusory. Thanks.
Thank you, and next we'll have Ann Peterson. After Ms. Peterson, we'll have Sebastian Aldana Jr.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ann Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation. The Trust is invested in this master planning process and the revitalization of State Street. We're excited about the potential for this planning process to be a truly collaborative effort. Thank you to MIG for including us in an information interview and for encouraging me to pass on historical information about State Street. I enjoyed giving planning staff a tour of the Presidio neighborhood recently as well. At the Trust, we believe in the power of preservation to revitalize downtown, and also the power of historical interpretation to support inclusive spaces where everyone can be seen and acknowledged. For example, the Trust has recently begun a Filipino oral history project that is producing a lot of information, not only about the Filipino Community Association building on the 400 block of State Street, but also the presence of Filipinos working in the hospitality industry throughout downtown, beginning in the early 20th century. This is one example of the stories that we can share in our public spaces that help support a vision of State Street as an inclusive space for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, and next we'll have Sebastian Aldana Jr., followed by Michael Bruce.
Good morning. My name is Sebastian Aldana Jr., native Barbareño. Thank you for the presentation. And I did see one good example of a downtown. It was called, well, not so much a downtown, but a shopping mall, outdoor shopping mall. It was called the Americana at Grand in Glendale. It was clean, it was unique, it had housing, retail, dining, outside dining, pedestrians, and a trolley. Very clean and organized. There was no bikes, e-bikes, skateboards, scooters, or anything with one or two wheels. I tend to feel currently we have a cluster in our downtown, and it'd be nice to have it clean and organized. Just a suggestion, maybe the bikes, maybe they could be on Anakepa and Chapala, just as another gal mentioned. It just kind of makes sense to me. And also in the last 15 plus years of assisting enhancing our community, I have learned that if you want a stop sign, a street light, or if you want to change the direction of the street, you have to have a proper study and analysis. So my question was, or is there a study and analysis of State Street to close it off? Because I do feel, because then if there isn't, maybe it needs to be opened up and then do it properly. To me, it seems to be a basic fundamental. Maybe we're putting the cart in front of the horse here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and next we will have Michael Bruce, followed by Richard Yates.
Hello, I'm Michael Bruce. I've recently returned to Santa Barbara after 30 years back east. I was a practicing architect here in Santa Barbara for 25 years, and then moved back east and recently got remarried, and it was New Jersey or Santa Barbara. Not a bad decision. I recently traveled to Spain, southern Spain. And as we know, a lot of the influence of Santa Barbara came from southern Spain. One of the towns that really impressed me, and I really urge you to look at, is Malaga. Now, Malaga, Spain, is the second most populous city within the community of Andalusia, and it's the sixth largest population in Spain. But what they have done to their downtown, which was first of all, considered back in 1880 is when they decided to, let's do something with the downtown. And it was only back in 2002 that they decided to make a lot of the streets just pedestrian ways. So I urge the city of Santa Barbara and the consultants to consider Malaga, even maybe talk to the planners and the historical people within Malaga or within even southern Spain. One thing that really impressed me was that there were no curbs in the main streets. From one side of the street, from one building across the street to the other building, it was just a paved plaza. And there were certain streets that cars could still go on. But one of the big things was the elimination of a lot of bikes. When you wanted to use that area for your bike, you got off your bike, you walked your bike, and then there were secondary streets that were major bike thoroughfares. So that's just my comment, is just consider southern Spain, some of the cities that have gone through this already. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll next have Richard Yates, followed by Steve Paladino.
Good morning, everybody. It's Richard Yates from Opal Restaurant and Bar. I'll do my best to keep my comments short. It's always challenging and more aspirational. First, just noting that we really appreciate the work the city has done to date, allowing flexibility and creativity in outdoor business spaces, particularly outdoor dining and other hospitality-based operations. Although not all may agree, it's become apparent that for a majority of locals and visitors, outdoor dining and other outdoor experiences have led to an economic and cultural revitalization of this important part of our beautiful city. Taking that into consideration, it does seem highly likely that the ultimate master plan will include not only our types of business, but hopefully also more retail and experiential operations as well. We do understand, however, now that many existing structures may require minor alterations for safety, city codes, and the like, and also, importantly, for areas where aesthetic improvements are necessary. Those of us with existing structures do accept the need for such revisions, but especially given the transitional and perhaps temporary impermanent nature of our specific existing structures, we would like to urge the Historic Landmarks Commission to think flexibly and creatively about design guidelines, and while taking into account our cultural heritage, not to adhere too rigidly to previous versions of that heritage, so that an interesting individuality of expression is still encouraged. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Steve Paladino, followed by Sally Foxer.
Hello. Hi, my name's Steve Paladino. I'm a professor of geography, environmental science, and GIS down at Ventura College, but I've been a resident here for a good part of my life, 30 years living downtown. Just a couple things. You're the professionals, but I'm not sure if you're considering using some of the modern geodesign tools, maybe just even in some of the charrettes, allowing the community to see, not just talk about the design. So that's one thing. Another is just looking forwards. We're going to be changing modality. We're being pushed into electric cars or being led graciously into electric cars, but there's also going to be more, however you look at it, there's going to be more probably small public transportation. They'll be electric-based and probably autonomous. We had, small trolleys, the bigger trolleys on State Street. They move people pretty well. One of the big concerns about roads or the lack thereof for vehicles is that people won't see State Street. Well, people are learning on all these crazy electric bikes, which I will probably get eventually. It's too expensive still for me. And on the transport that we've had a chance to see. So we're not going to have a problem understanding State Street, especially with good design. I do want to put in some input. I do ride my bike whenever I can in the downtown corridor. State Street's wonderful. Right now it's a little chaotic. we can have bikes on State Street. Anacapa and Chapala would be very dangerous, except for the few that are very competent riding in major traffic corridors. So we need to see if we can do it all. Can we have public transportation? Can we have bikes? Can we have pedestrians? Can we have parklets, or actually better, expanded places for our restaurants? We can do it all. We really can. And I'm looking forward to see what you come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sally Foxer, followed by Lee Williams.
Hi, I'm Sally Foxen, and I came to speak asking whether or not you really will take into consideration all of the locals, which includes those who are disabled, who cannot currently walk down State Street safely, cannot cross streets safely because cars cross State Street and they don't necessarily stop. I'd also like to echo Mr. Aldana's statement about where is the project analysis that you all took. We would love to see that. And as he said, in order to get a stop sign installed at a corner, you have to have warrants, you have to have project analysis, which I am sure have not been done. The other aspect, or another aspect, is people who cannot drive down State Street, who have no idea where buildings are, where restaurants are, where stores are, can no longer drive down State Street to find out. There is, you start at Haley Street and you go up to Mitchell Terrena, no access, absolutely none, which is ridiculous. Santa Barbara was never this way. I'm born here, raised here, lived almost all my life here. And everybody has excluded us. Y'all have excluded the people of color who do not have access to get downtown now. And that's really a shame, because this city was built on the backs of these people, the people of color, who you all have ignored. And I really hope that you take this into consideration, because if you don't, you've just killed Santa Barbara and State Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Lee Williams, followed by Nancy Palmer.
Excuse me, very quick. I live downtown, and I very much miss the State Street shuttle. So, and I know tourists used it constantly. So I would like for there to be some consideration of something much smaller, you know, as in this sort of electric vehicle that's used in airports. It's a really big deal, especially for tourism and in the interest of people with disabilities. I will just say, secondly, this is really quick, I'm very concerned about the speed of electric bicycles on State Street. People are handling them very dangerously. That said, I'm delighted about what's happening with the city, with the Library Plaza, Delegaro Plaza, State Street. I just feel the vitality, and I'm so grateful for the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker will be Nancy Palmer.
Hi, Nancy Palmer, food tour guide in Santa Barbara, California. I am downtown every day, walking State Street, talking history, guiding tourists around State Street, and discussing the history. There's a lot of lovely history, and the tourists love it. However, it's very embarrassing how dirty the streets are, and the smell. It is, we see a lot of things. Like I said, I'm downtown every day. If you want to take my name and my number, I can tell you stories. A lot of people exposing themselves, peeing and pooping. It's embarrassing. And until the city or the committee or whatever takes into account these things, I know a lot of people who won't go down to downtown because of because of this. So I love Santa Barbara. I love, touring, and I love talking about the history, but we have to do something about cleaning up the city. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do not have any more speaker slips. We did receive written correspondence from Roman Baratiek, Allison Cote, and Bob Cunningham, which was distributed to both commissions prior to the meeting. Back to you, chairs.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we'll turn it back to both commissions for any questions that you may have. As stated previously, we're limited on time, so please, let's limit our questions.
And then, just to be clear, thanks. And then just to be clear, we'll have, each of you have your own 2 minutes to also give your comments, and then we'll get into the discussion. So right now, just questions for clarification, especially, in addition to any speakers might have brought something up as well in terms of what you want answered to the presenters. So,
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had several speakers talk about the State Street vehicular closure, so, and had a study been done. So I'd just like staff to address that. I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Yes, so we are doing an existing conditions analysis. The MIG team is working on a number of different topics, including transportation and mobility. We have Farron Piers, who's a really experts in transportation, along with city transportation staff working on what a potential closure in the long term could look like.
Thank you. Commissioner Higgins? And then Commissioner Wardlow, do you have a question as well?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to staff, one of the big elephants in the room is Paseo Nuevo. You mentioned the other public planning processes for the other parts of the downtown, but and I don't want to derail what we're doing here today, but I think there needs to be some instruction given to the further meetings and groups about how that property is being re-envisioned or what's happening with it, because that's a major organ for us. And if you can address it without letting me derail you, that'd be fine.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. So the Paseo Nuevo area is certainly right in the center of this project, right? And really what it ultimately is going to really help, I think, or perhaps not, this space. So we, as the city, we really want to see something that's going to be vibrant in the Paseo Nuevo area. I can't really speak much beyond that at this point. I mean, there are different conversations about office use and housing use in the area. Mr. Harris, Jason Harris, the Economic Development Manager, is taking the lead on the Paseo Nuevo front, and we can certainly come back with more information on that.
Commissioner Wardlow, and then Vice Chair Bonderson.
Thank you, Chair Escobedo. Thank you for the presentation. This was definitely helpful. My question regards mobility and kind of what is staff currently proposing or thinking about in terms of how we can make sure that pedestrians, bicyclists, skateboarders can all utilize State Street together. Obviously, we hear a lot of complaints about this, so just want to hear kind of what staff is considering right now.
Sure, thank you, Commissioner Wardlow. So there's a team of staff at the city working on what we're calling the interim operations. And what that really is what's State Street looking like today. And I think all of us in this room can recognize that there are improvements that we can make in the downtown core. We do often hear about pedestrian and bicycle concerns. And so staff, both in Public Works and Community Development, are working to really think about what different things we can do in the space to improve mobility. I don't have what we're going to be doing in the space here for you today, but we can come back with you on that. Yes, Commissioner Wardlow.
That was helpful. So if we're still in the working process on that. On the State Street Trolley, which I loved growing up and I think a lot of people really enjoyed, I know there were issues with it as well. What are the thoughts on potentially bringing that back, or the issues that we've had, just so we understand if that's an option?
Sure, Commissioner Wardlow. So the State Street Trolley did stop at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. The cost was prohibitive for the city at the time. We are looking at some sort of option to move people up and down the street, both really as part of the long-term planning efforts, also perhaps in the shorter term as well. Again, I don't have specific information for you on whether a trolley will come back or what that will look like in terms of timing, but I can assure you that staff is working on that.
All right, Vice Chair Bonderson and then Commissioner Balke.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My question is with regard to the vagrancy and cleanliness issue on State Street. We hear about it all the time, and we certainly experience it all ourselves while being in downtown. My question is to the city staff. Could you share with us a little bit about what is currently being actively happening with regard to cleaning up the area or managing the homelessness issue? I know we have volunteers that do that, but what are some of the immediate and more aggressive plans to help clean up downtown, if any?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Bonderson. So I'll talk a little bit about the issues that you raised. I do want to highlight that the downtown Public Works team is really taking the lead on the current efforts, and so I don't believe we have them with us today, but we can get back to you with a more detailed analysis. Just in terms of cleanliness, the city team has completed is completing quarterly cleanings. That's something that's new to the space over the last year. I believe they started in August. So the first cleaning did occur shortly after Fiesta, and then we'll be doing those quarterly. That's just a recognition that the street obviously has changed from a vehicular street to one where pedestrians and bicyclists are using the space and people are eating out in the street, and there is more need for cleaning. In terms of some of the homelessness issues, we are working closely with the police department as well as SB Act and others in that space, really trying to identify different needs and how we can approach the issue. But it's a challenging one. It's one that our downtown struggles with, but quite honestly, it's also an issue that many downtowns throughout the state struggle with. And so we're actively working on trying to find opportunities to increase our efforts there.
And just in an effort to be mindful of time and also for the questions, I think these are all great questions, but I think our key factor right now for questions is to focus on what the long term is and what we have in terms of questions from the presenters. So I think these are all really great discussions, and in the interim, but in the effort for staying on task, any other questions for the presenters for the long term?
Sure, I have one question
Commissioner Butler,
left, and that is a timing question for the consultants or for staff. I just wanted to know, obviously we are planning community outreach, but do we have a general timeline where first steps of implementation are being set, where we aim to begin, time-wise?
Yes, Commissioner Bonderson. So we're looking at really working on the implementation framework and having a draft of that sometime between May and July timeframe in 2023. That will come after some of the conceptual designs, and then as we're refining a community design concept, the implementation framework will be in the works.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's the end of my question.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonderson. Commissioner Balke?
One quick question. What is your engagement process with police and fire? My experience with this kind of work, the fire department's flexibility as to corridors and areas of clear access space is going to drive this project. So what's the engagement process, and what flexibility do you have with them on this project? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Balke. We have really close relationships with both city police department and the fire department. I interact with them on a very regular basis, and we do closely coordinate their needs as well as what we're really envisioning for the future of downtown. As we get through the process and as we start to talk about conceptual designs and have something for them to really comment on and provide input, they'll definitely have a close seat at the table so that we can understand what the public safety needs are.
All right, Commissioner Butler?
Similar question. There are a number of projects either under development or proposed that will fall within this zone area or approximate to it. And my question is there a process or expectation for integration and inclusion of those as the planning of this zone goes forward?
Commissioner, yes, I think that's an excellent question. And as we go through the process, I think we'll have a number of different items that will come up in terms of zoning and policy and design. And so all of those will be taken into account.
Other questions? All right. And just as a question for clarification on terms of process, so both Planning Commission and Historic Landmarks Commission will be seeing as things get developed and as things start to take form, they're going to be coming to each respectively and getting input, and we'll get more bites at the apple. Once there is an apple.
Those are joint hearings?
I don't know what the plan is, and then so maybe clarification on what that process might look like
Sure.
as to expect.
Chair Grumbine and Commissioners, right now we do have 3 joint hearings that are scheduled. So we will be coming to both groups and talking about the conceptual design and then the preferred design framework and going from there. And I just wanted to highlight, I recognize that this meeting is really exciting and is also challenging because we don't have something in front of us today. So it can be hard to comment on a project without having design right in front of you. But I appreciate both groups being here today to tell us and give us input on the different questions that will be up on the PowerPoint screen, and just really wanting to hear from you both personally and as a commission member from the Planning Commission and the Historic Landmarks Commission, what types of, when you close your eyes, what you really think State Street and the downtown area should be, and what really resonates with you. And so I look forward to that discussion.
All right, thank you. So I guess the other framework on this was going to be having each of our respective those on HLC, and the designated HLC and Planning Commissioner that have been part of the State Street advisory group to kind of kick us off with have some extra time and maybe set the framework of what they've seen from that, and then we'll take turns going down the Planning Commission and HLC for the other members, and then asking that everyone stick to a 2-minute, and then we can, the more time we have left over, the more we can discuss all the ideas that have been coming out.
Yeah. So we are going to kick off our deliberations with Vice Chair Bonderson.
All right, well, thank you. Before I even begin, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's come out here today to join us from the public. I think the public process is an extremely important part of this, and I commend the city and the consultant for making sure that that is a consistent part of our experience, making sure that our locals and anyone interested has a voice. So thank you all for being here and for sending in public comment in writing as well. So I think I can answer all the questions that were put out to us and to share some experience of what we've been watching and hearing all together, and I'll bundle it all up. But I wanted to start by saying, from my personal experience, I would certainly prioritize certain aspects, because often we have to lay the framework first before launching a project. So before we even go into implementation of the master plan, some things need to be cleaned up and adjusted. So I would start by saying, first and foremost, the improving the city's cleanliness and safety of downtown is the utmost key. It will lead to the desire for individuals to come to State Street, want to stay on State Street, spend money on State Street, and have experiences. So I just want to emphasize the importance of addressing the safety and cleanliness issue as a priority. As a big part of that is to find immediate and consistent solutions to the vagrancy issue, but also the idea that if those are addressed immediately, even before we physically see the project take off, people are already going to be more attracted to being downtown and keeping it vital, revitalizing it. And we shouldn't wait for that, but I know that that's common knowledge. Another safety issue, it's been brought up, is that people don't really feel safe walking on State Street due to having to share the road with bicyclists. Excessive speeds of the electric bikes is a concern, and also individuals just doing tricks and wheelies, and the fact that it's not, there's not a lot of enforcement at the moment. So it really contributes to the fear of pedestrians wanting to share the space. As it is now, because of that, pedestrians aren't utilizing the street closure as much as they could and they should. But clearly, we hope that a total shift of how the bicycles are using the space may be considered to help create a true pedestrian promenade and truly make it easier, an easier pedestrian experience, a safer and easier experience. Also, the second item I would like to share is when planning for the future, we have to simultaneously strategize transportation and circulation. Our public transportation system here has to be addressed. It needs to be improved prior to increasing housing and experiences and activities. And this types of infrastructure must successfully be functioning first in order to be able to effectively plan for the housing element. It's really about laying down that framework and making sure it works so that when the increase happens, increase in housing, increase in activities, that we have a system in place that's really already functioning. Some quick
Vice Chair
example.
Bonderson, if you could wrap up your thoughts.
Sure. The last piece of this that I wanted to share is just a good example, and I'll end with this example. We recently saw a project on Garden Street in September for the Planning Commission, and there was an opportunity to plan the pedestrian and bicycle circulation as part of that design. Yet the city's pedestrian and bicycle master plan has not yet been implemented in that area. So incorporating it as part of the project and making it part of the project was a lost opportunity. So I just want to end by just saying that planning for that pedestrian circulation and that public transportation network early on is really important. And I hope that that will be a big consideration for our consultants and for our staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, the members of the State Street Advisory Committee get a little extra time
Thank you
to
so
share
much,
their
everyone.
experience on the committee. So,
All right, Commissioner Lenvik, with that, would you like to tell us about your State Street Advisory thoughts and then your own personal thoughts?
Yeah, the State Street Advisory Committee actually had its first meeting in August of 21. So we've been around a while, and most of our meetings, and they were started out at like once a month, but as we got into it, we more or less stopped our meetings. But we had presentations from Public Works on how they maintain State Street cleanliness. We had presentations on transportation and the problems they have with regard to vehicle movements, particularly in the lower State Street area. We had a number of presentations from the city staff, and those presentations were to inform us as to the problems that we were going to have to deal with when the planning firm was selected. I think we stopped having regular meetings probably in 4 or 5 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever it was, with our major meeting occurring in August. And that's when the planning firm, MIG, had been selected, retained by the City Council, and we had the first work session. The State Street Advisory Committee had the first work session with them on August 15th, and it was a 2 or 3 hour meeting. I'm surprised Dave Davis isn't here to tell us about that.
I saw him.
Really? Dave can correct me if he chooses, which he does quite often. But we had really a good meeting. We, each of the 17 advisory committee members threw out a lot of ideas to the planner, and those ideas went on a whiteboard. It just went on and on and on, the whiteboard did, and I think they got a good sense of what the State Street Advisory Committee at least felt was important to the city. So now we're in that second public meeting dealing with the Planning Commission and HLC, with the public also having input, and there are going to be a lot more meetings. So I think the most important thing is that we're going to have a State Street Advisory Committee meeting on the 27th. We don't know the location yet. I think we know the time, but I'm sure that'll get out, and all of the public members will have an opportunity to participate in that meeting as well. So it'll be another work session for State Street Advisory Committee. Then the next big meeting is, of course, on November 3rd and 4th, and it will be someplace on State Street. We think that the State Street Advisory Committee will be there in force, at least I hope they will, as well as Planning Commission and HLC members, to help us understand what the community wants to see. I think that, I'm not sure, I want to call it filtering through us, but we will again be dealing on maybe a more involved basis with the planner than all of the community members in the city will be. So we will be meeting again, and those meetings are identified. So that's where we are from a standpoint of a State Street Advisory Committee. And I think that, I say a lot of good items came out of that meeting. I will make a few comments here right now to start off the HLC's comment portion. I think that one of the comments that I heard at the meeting in August that I grabbed onto, and I hope other members of the State Street Advisory Committee and the staff and the planners that grabbed onto, was one by Mike Jordan, who is a city council member and member of the State Street Advisory Committee. And I wrote it down, but I'm sure I didn't get all his words, but he said that when the look of the buildings on State Street in the past has been probably the only attraction Santa Barbara had to bring tourists and even the locals downtown. And we got to keep that in mind, that Santa Barbara State Street was a very beautiful street, and we've got to get that back. As a Landmark Commission member, and I've been an ABR member, I've been involved in the community for who knows how many years, but every year this community has gotten more beautiful from the standpoint of its built environment due to the concerns of the property owners, the developers, and the design review boards and planning commission. The city has gotten more beautiful. I look at what's happened in the last 2 years, and I say we have regressed a lot on State Street. We have lost a lot, and we've got to pick up our feet and really get back to making sure that State Street is the beautiful city it is. I have in my library at home a little pamphlet. Give me 2 more minutes.
No, 2 minutes is the
okay. A pamphlet by Sunset Magazine, and I believe it was maybe like early 1970s, and maybe Sheila Lodge remembers it or not. But it's a beautiful cover photo of Santa Barbara, and it talks about the beauty of the architecture and why people come to Santa Barbara. So that's one thing. I appreciate Mike Jordan's comments. I'm glad I quoted them. I don't know if he's in the audience or not. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I want to throw out an idea.
All right, 45 seconds.
Okay. I don't know that State Street has to be 11 blocks of promenade. I don't know that it has to be. I think there is probably a good segment of State Street that should be promenade, but not the whole thing. I don't see people, getting out of their car down in the 500 or 600 block of State Street and wandering into various shops going up. In the past, if you went to Macy's, you parked at Macy's, you wanted to go up to the library, up to the museum gift shop, you got in your car and drove up and parked near there. You're not going to walk 4, 5, 6 blocks to shop on State Street. State Street is economically too long, and I think that has to be corrected, and it can be corrected, and it can be a promenade, it can be a semi-promenade, it can be a lot of things, but I don't believe that we should be spending multiple millions of dollars on some streets that have only 2 restaurants on them. You know.
All right, I think we're gonna have to hook the, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
My
okay.
comments.
All right. So we'll go back to Planning Commission. I know it was an ambitious goal, 2 minutes, but we're going to try to stick to it as much as we can. And I'll just, for the Planning Commissioners, interject when we're at the 2-minute mark so that folks can wrap up their thoughts. And we'll go down the line. We'll go Planning Commission, then back to HLC, and we'll start with Commissioner Balke.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make my comments quick too. But it's my assessment that community engagement is the critical part here because we've got different age groups and having different views of State Street. And we need to plan for the future of State Street for all of Santa Barbara. And that includes ethnicity groups too, and disabled groups too. So you have an all-inclusive situation. And of all the consultants that you are choosing from, MIG is the best at the engagement side of the ledger. So I'm glad you picked them because that I think is very important on this project. The other concerns I have, which you've already heard, which is circulation issues, conflicts between pedestrians and bicyclists and others. Decisions are going to need to be made of whether a particular block is pedestrian only or a mixture, and we're going to just have to make those, and I think that goes back to the chair of the HLC or the comments from the
Commissioner Lenvik.
Yeah, Mr. Lenvik's comments, which is it may not be a solution for all. Certain blocks may be pedestrian only, certain blocks may be a combination, and some of them may go back to having cars. So I think we need to open that dialogue. And as I brought in my very first comment, the discussion with the public works folks and the health safety folks drive a lot of these decisions, whether we like it as designers or planners. Their ability and willingness to allow pedestrian only and closing things off and changing their way of doing business is going to be very critical. So those are the comments I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to Vice Chair House.
Thank you. I was very encouraged to hear that most, if not all, of the public speakers that address bicycles and other vehicles on State Street share my concern. That is one of my major issues. We closed State Street to vehicles, and bicycles are vehicles. I thank Commissioner Lodge for sharing her comprehensive photographs from her travels of different pedestrian promenade streets around the world. And I think I saw one picture that showed a bicycle, and it was either being walked or it was parked. I also went online some time ago to look at the promenade in Santa Monica, and visitors have shared like a couple thousand photographs. And likewise, I did not see people riding bicycles in there. I don't have a problem with people walking bicycles or driving at the same speed or a little faster than a pedestrian, but that's not what happens. And the only way to control that is either not allow motorized vehicles or just not allow them at all, or have more enforcement. You know, and enforcement, we can't have police all over watching the speed limit that bikes are moving. So I think they need to not be allowed. I appreciate the comments about alternative routes, Chapala, Anacapa, whatever it may be, because bicyclists need to get somewhere. I also appreciate the public speaker who addressed the trolley no longer being there, and I think that addresses a lot of issues to have that as another mode of transportation on State Street. I've traveled to a lot of European cities and just always admired how it's one paving material all the way across. The restaurants are up against the buildings and don't exceed the width of their frontage. It's just delightful, and they often have a very sleek, modern, contemporary trolley system.
Time check.
Oh, my time is up. Anyway, yeah. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You haven't started that timer yet, have you?
You had a freebie there. It would have been like a whole minute.
Now, don't cut into my time here. I'm just going to talk about, first of all, what's working and not working. One of the speakers says it's chaotic. I think it is. ADA access is also, I think, an issue and continues to be an issue. Councilmember Friedman said, and this goes to Commissioner Lenvick's comments, Santa Barbara is recognized as an architecturally significant city, and State Street is its epicenter. And I thought that was really, really something that we need to highlight that we haven't highlighted. He said that at the meeting where they were talking. At any rate, very quickly, hopes for the future. That State Street is a place where we live, work, and play. I know we hear that a lot, but the live part isn't there yet. And the buildings are 0 lot line clearance on a lot of them, and we want to bring people down there to live, work, and play. I know the community will be involved in the play portion, which includes arts and culture and activities for kids. But the live part is the challenge. And we are known as environmental leaders in Santa Barbara is an environmental leader. And I think one thing that I would like to see accomplished is a stormwater plan for State Street that allows, and so I'm going underground, that allows developers to develop their property for live spaces and connect to a system that the city has installed that captures and treats the stormwater. And it can be done economically for developers and encourage them to provide the live portion of a State Street master plan. So we have a live, work, and play environment downtown. So, did I make it?
You nailed it.
Okay. Good.
Well done.
I saw you watching me,
yes.
so.
All right, Commissioner Drury.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to riff off of Commissioner Lenvick's speech. I think what's working are the parklets. They're a good faith response to revitalize State Street in response to the COVID. What's not working are the parklets. Because they block any view, if you're walking down the middle of State Street, any view of those wonderful facades that Mr. Commissioner Lenvick spoke of. And that to me is the most critical thing to deal with are those parklets. They are sometimes, I can never call them attractive. Sometimes they're nicely built. Most of the time they're not well built at all. The further down State Street you get, they become rather junky. So that would be what's working and not working for me, and I would like to see that addressed as quickly as possible. Thank you. Under 2 minutes?
Yeah, under 1 minute.
Thank you.
You're like the star right now.
Wow.
Do you have anything else to say? You can like sell your minute to one of the.
Yeah. Commissioner Higgins, you don't get 3 minutes.
I note I'll be pooling his time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs, and thank you to staff, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with HLC, and we get siloed so often in the city with what we do. This is a nice break from that. So one comment, nobody under the age of 20 here, maybe not even under the age of 30, so I want to make sure your outreach hits those kids that are going to be the implementers or the users of this plan in the future. Hopefully they can afford to still live here by the time they get out of college. Longer term vision, the mix of use is important, not only residential, but schools, healthcare, The Indian Healthcare Service that's coming to Upper State Street is a welcome addition to my neighborhood. And recreation and public assembly or churches is a big deal. UCSB and Santa Barbara City College are huge components of our community, and they don't have any direct connectivity downtown, and so the commenter and the other comments about additional public transit and how that works is part of a longer range plan that I think I would love to have part of this plan. Certainly the shrinkage of the promenade or the focus of the energy is going to cause that energy to grow if it's in a smaller area. I think that's fundamental. And the bike diet. We do need a bike diet. I enjoy riding my bike on State Street, but I probably won't for too much longer because it's getting a little bit more difficult to get on and off my bike and avoid hazards. And so I look forward to keeping some bike traffic on State Street if at all possible. I also think bringing cars back to State Street is an important thing to consider. And how that interplays with, whether or not the promenade has shrunk and we can bring cars back, I think is important for economic vitality, and those things about discovery of the attractions is important. And lastly, and connected to that is I'd like to see part of this plan include a public safety element that is an extra layer of public safety engagement for State Street, because it will address those things that are both nuisance and hazardous that get in the way no matter what we might plan for that will be undermined.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins.
All right, to Commissioner Ensberg.
Thank you. Thank you, chairs, and thank you for this opportunity to be here today. Greetings to the public here. I will just add I agree with much of what everyone else has already said, particularly about the circulation, all of these things. I believe that what we have done, let's just remember, we have a beautiful, beautiful city, period. We do. And right now, it's not looking so beautiful. We understand that we brought in some things to help us out when COVID hit. That was 2.5 years ago. So I'm glad that what I think is working, I'm glad that we did that. I'm glad we helped out some businesses. But I think there were many, many, many unintended consequences of that I think we are still suffering from today, now that it's 2.5 years later. So I think I love the master plan. All architects love master plans. These are great, and I think there should be a portion of the master plan that studies the much broader city. I'm not saying that we're doing master plan for the whole city, but we need to understand what's going on in other areas like the Funk Zone, like Milpas, like Upper State. All these other areas contribute to what happens on State Street, which is our main downtown, and which was designed in such a beautiful, classic way. That's what we love. I would like to see, because I know I'm probably close to out of time, I would like to see us to return to the conditions with great emphasis on trying to find as many ways as possible, because we all agree we want to be outside. That's why we live here in Santa Barbara. It's not about the name Parklet. It's about being outside to do everything, including Thanksgiving dinner in November with all our fancy crystal outside. That's what we want to do. So there's no question about that. We don't have to ask, does everybody like the parklets? Parklets are a completely different thing. I would like to suggest that we immediately put every effort into putting our dining back onto the sidewalks and make them be as large as possible, while we also respect the public right-of-way, and that there should be areas for the public to use without having to go into a restaurant to be able to sit outside. And one last thing.
Commissioner Drury is giving you this extra little.
Okay. And that we return to pre-COVID, to how it was pre-COVID, and then do our work as the master plan. But we have complicated everything by doing part of what is the master plan. I mean, is it a foregone conclusion that we are going to close State Street forever? And why are we not including from Cabrillo Boulevard up to Sola? That is a huge important part of it. So I'll stop there.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Because now you are over Commissioner Drury's extra minute.
All right. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in a curious position here. Over 30 years ago, I suggested that Santa Barbara, after visiting the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica and visiting Boulder's Pearl Street Mall, that just for an experiment, on a couple of weekends, we close a couple of blocks to traffic. Well, the downtown merchants, particularly the owner of La Arcada, just came totally unglued. The owner of La Arcada brought in an outside consultant to see what we could do, and the consultant's suggestion was bring back the parking to State Street. That obviously didn't happen. And I've had the opportunity to be in a number of cities around the world that do have pedestrian promenades, and what seems to, the two most successful ones that I've seen now, and this has been a while ago, are Boulder and Charlottesville, Virginia. And what is common to them is that they have, the street is covered with canopy trees, which gives a sense of enclosure. And they are outdoor living, they're community outdoor living rooms. And that's what I want to see happen on State Street. And I think it can be done. I think the others, the successful ones that I've seen are shorter. I think it's way too long. What we have, 4 or 5 blocks is probably what it should be. There should be public places for people to sit, as someone already mentioned. And the bicycles just can't, as one of the public commenters said, pedestrians and bicyclists don't go together. And they have to be limited to no more than they being wheeled down State Street. I know there are people who come to State Street because they like the vibe and so on. There are other people who stay away because they're afraid of the bikes, and including me.
Commissioner Lodge, if you could wrap up your last thought.
Okay. The city needs to create a beautiful, welcoming environment there on State Street, and as I said, have it become a community living room. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Manuel.
I think you showed some images of bikes and people together. It'd be really nice to see case studies of if there's best management practices of what you found from those, since it's going to always be a big public issue. As was talked about, the overall length of the closure, I'm not so sure I'm for the whole closure. There's a lot of kind of organic business districts that have been formed, and some of those might be strengthened by closures or linked together. I'm glad Commissioner Lodge spoke up for landscaping and trees. I was feeling outnumbered with architecture.
It's all about the architecture.
Being
all
the
of
star
it.
of the show. I think if you go and sit on any spot in State Street, it's a case study in looking around at what's lively and what's how much landscaping is around. And Santa Barbara is kind of a star of the show as it relates to landscaping kind of in the country. Stormwater is also going to be a huge opportunity. It's rare to get such an opportunity to cover a large area of impervious area that can be tied into one. I think the Paseos deserve a lot of attention, which have been somewhat, they're just, some of them are a little void. And then lastly, I think this needs to be, you mentioned it in your presentation, but there needs to be a huge sense of place. This needs to look, feel like Santa Barbara from material to spatial form. So that's it.
All right, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Wardlow.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this informative presentation. In summary, to me, I'm very supportive and I really appreciate what has happened downtown with the closure. I think there's 4 main things that I'm really concerned about. So one, a few people have spoken about, us being a real environmental leader, and I think that's true. And I think when we talk about pedestrians, bicycles, skateboarders, all of these different ways in which people get around our community, it's an opportunity for us to really be a leader in showing how we can have pedestrians, bikers, skateboarders all be in the same place, because this is critical for us to figure out if we're really trying to go towards an area of having live, work, play, right? Because we are currently, moving away from requiring parking. So if we're moving away from requiring parking, we need to ensure that all individuals can utilize different options for transportation. So I see making sure we have a State Street that is closed but can accommodate these different uses is going to be really important. On businesses, I'm thrilled with the way in which I think there's just more of a community downtown because of the outdoor dining experience. I think we all live here because we love outdoors, as mentioned previously. And I think we, as the government here and as the leaders here, we need to really be able to provide consistency and direction and standards towards our businesses, because they are the lifeblood of State Street. Right? They are the reason that there's tourism and that all of us come down there. So that's a huge component of this. And then thirdly, I think the family-friendly atmosphere, I hear this over and over again. People are very concerned. It has been depleted in recent years. How do we work together to ensure that people feel comfortable bringing their young kids down there? Because again, for a 30 to 50-year plan, if our goal is to make State Street, live, work, play, we need to ensure that families feel comfortable down there. And then lastly, I'd say, 30 to 50 years is a long time. Autonomous vehicles are coming, and I hope that this, as we continue to plan for this, that we really do the work to understand how this new industry will impact city planning. And that's the conclusion of my remarks.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardlow.
Did you want to give your spiel? I'll time you.
Ring me in. Yeah. So I'll just start with the fact that it's hard sometimes to think about these things conceptually because we're thinking about what currently exists. I think if we're thinking about some of the positives right now, there's more activity, there's more folks downtown than there were before the closure. I think some of the drawbacks to that is it's quite disjointed, it feels. There is a lot of tension between bikes and pedestrians, but it's also because the street wasn't designed to accommodate both in the same space. And I think there's a way to design, to Commissioner Wardlow's point, multiple modes of transportation, and it's particularly important when we talk about inclusivity. There are folks that don't have the mobility to get from the top of State Street down, and having some sort of shuttle service is really important. And in terms of design, when I'm thinking about what this space could be, I'm thinking about as inclusive as possible, universal design. Spaces where you don't have to spend money, where you can go to State Street, you can bring your lunch, you can bring your kids, and you can people watch if you want, or you can just enjoy a public space. I love the comments by Commissioner Wiscombe about stormwater management. I think that's going to be key, and it's also going to be more beautiful because a lot of that is going to be greenery and a lot of the landscaping. I think for me, I'm thinking art. I want to see public art, and if it's interactive art, I want to see that. I want to see the experience change as I'm going down State Street, whether that's districts or just theme or decorations. I want it to be an experience for folks. I think that'll draw people downtown. And I would love to see history as well. I would love to see art that tells our story, and that includes our indigenous story and many of the pieces that I don't think get told very often in Santa Barbara, but is a key piece of how we got here. And I went a little over. I'm sorry. You didn't reel me in.
I know. I was letting you time yourself, because now I'm going to time myself, and it's going to get way worse. No, just kidding. Okay, so I guess I would start off with, because everyone talks about bikes, I came up with a solution that's going to work great. So if we just make everyone do 1800s historic bicycles, no one will go fast, and people that fall over probably knock themselves out, and they won't do it anymore. So there, we're all in support of historic bicycles. But seriously, though, I think when I look at it, I think this is a moment, this is sort of the fifth major moment in Santa Barbara's urban development history, where it started with Chumash villages. We have the Presidio and eventually the Mission up on the hill and the adobes surrounding them as the next sort of major step. and move. And then we had the American period where it becomes during Victorian times, and the grid that gets laid over Santa Barbara and organized. And then the fourth one was the Paseos and El Paseo pre-earthquake, setting the stage for what Santa Barbara could be with a regular grid with a romantic wander, get lost, and then come out on the other side and you're in a regular grid. So creating that space. So we're at step 5 in my mind, where this really has the potential to now work with all that we have, all the layers we have, and now take it to another level and add another level of beauty. Sorry, are you guys getting feedback with this, Mike? Okay. I get an extra 5 minutes because of that. Okay, so what I don't think it is right from a design level, what I don't think, can I just steal yours? What I don't think it is it's me, is a series of checklists of I like or not like. Do I want bikes on it? Do I want walking on it? Do I want cars on it? But I really think it needs to be a clear, cohesive concept and design, a very strong design. For those of you that saw the cover, which is probably everyone here, of the AIA charrette, and they had that quatrefoil, beautiful whole design that group had done very well, and there's lots of groups doing it, and there's all kinds of different designs. But it showed the very clear concept for them. That design was all pedestrian. It was this series of formal parks kind of linked together and changed by blocks, and with some trolley, with some other things. It was a very well thought through as a cohesive whole. And it's not a checklist that does that. It's a clear design concept that does it, and I think that needs to be sort of nailed. In the end, I think the only direction is it just needs to be nothing short of brilliant. So good luck. And then how will we know that it is? And I think the one is we'll see a cohesive, clear concept that we can identify and talk about, like the concept of a paseo. It was very clear, and it works throughout, and it creates something in the urban fabric. And it will get better with age. That's another key part. We can imagine this in all different technologies in all different ways. It's actually an aging well city addition. And then finally, the last most important one, it will be painted by artists more than the Santa Barbara courthouse. So that's I think the challenge. And if you can do it, if we can do it, then I think that we'll have nailed it and we'll have taken Santa Barbara to the next level. So, all right. So now, why don't we go into discussion mode? How much time do we have total for this and to keep on our general schedule? I just want to make sure we kind of...
Chair, so it's somewhat up to you. We have probably up to an hour till about 12:30. If we want to go that long, we could also end a little bit earlier than that. So it's up to you on timing.
Okay, well, why don't we try to stick to 45 maybe? Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay. All right, so I think this is the part where now we want to discuss out a lot of these ideas, big, small, everything, and hopefully give feedback to, some good feedback to continue the discussion. So.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't at least ask if Mr. Davis wanted to come on down and give us some feedback on what he's heard. I have a question for him, and if he's not ready to, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I'd like to hear his perspective on what the committee's greatest challenges are to completing some of this work in the short term.
So just in terms of order, do we need to open public comment for that, or, okay.
But I don't see him.
Oh, he's, do you want to come up? We'll open up public comment, reopen
right.
Public comment.
Sorry to break rank, but
Yeah, that's fine.
So, question for you, Mr. Davis. Thank you for coming. Can you react to what you've heard today? And also, my specific question of you is, what do you think immediate obstacles are to this process that are in the near view over the next 24 months that we can maybe help clear for you?
Microphone. I'm not sure if the mic's on.
Now it is. Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Again, I appreciate all the comments from everybody, from the public and from the Commission and HLC. The next 24 months is going to be very challenging. I think for myself, I think the most challenging thing is there are so many things in flux. There are so many things that we don't know as we're going forward, which I think for me makes it a different challenge than we had in the past. We've talked about mobility. I believe the economic system that we're dealing with here is basically very fragile, and we're not quite sure what that next step's going to be. There's going to be socioeconomic changes within the community, such that the next 24 months and engaging the community productively looking forward for 20 years is a very difficult subject matter to do. I think again, I heard a lot today of issues that deal with the interim operations. Again, it's so, you get caught up in kind of like, what's out there today and how do we deal with the conflicts as we see them today. I think the biggest conflict I see is essentially getting past that and looking forward for a 20-year vision. That is very challenging as a community. But I think we have a good team. I think we have an engaged community, and I'm really anxious to get going. And so this is one of our first steps. So thank you for the question. Thank you for letting me comment. And again, thank you all for your efforts today. Good job, staff.
Mm-hmm. I would just like to add a little note for those of you who don't know Dave Davis or don't know the extent. If you want to see Dave Davis from a little over 20 years ago running the symposium on De La Guerra Plaza, which also did a deep dive into the history of Santa Barbara and the public spaces, I highly recommend it. I think the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation has on their website from 1999, and it's a fantastic 4 hours of your life that you will very much enjoy, or maybe not. It'll just be all about bikes. So anyways, highly recommend it. And yeah, he's been part of this discussion of good downtown living for a long, long time. So thanks for that question. Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, good point. We'll close public comment, back to the commission for discussion.
I have a question of the MIG consultant. And I don't expect an answer today, but I think we need to have some idea of successful promenades. How long are they? 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, whatever. I've looked through your publication called Streets, and it doesn't seem to me that there are many promenades that get past 3 or 4 blocks that are successful. And I would hate to think that we as a community are walking along, skipping along, and saying, gosh, we're going to have an 11-block promenade, and it's going to really be successful. We're going to look at all these pretty pictures you draw, and we got people smiling and whatever. And the reality is that you've not experienced or designed or come across long promenades. So it's a comment and a question.
So, Commissioner, you're right. Let me just say it this way. The length of a promenade is dependent upon a number of things. It's dependent upon, the population, the number of people who come to an area, so on and so forth. It's also dependent upon, how much people would like to walk. People usually don't walk 10, 12 blocks at one. But they could start at one place and, they could start in the middle and go north, east, west, north, south. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. Nobody will walks all 12 blocks, but at the same time, they may start and stop in the middle of it or a third of it. So it means different things to different places. I think some folks already brought it up. Pearl Street in Boulder is a really good example, and the city went through a very long process of testing it out as to what works, what doesn't work. So they actually started by closing it on weekends during, short intervals of time, and then testing how people felt about it. And but it was also, the way I learned the story about Pearl Street was the community said, we are a family-friendly city. For us to be a family-friendly city, children should come first. What would make a street where the children is the first user, and like I've learned over a period of time, if you bring the children in, everybody else comes too. But if you just design for able-bodied adults, you exclude a lot of people. So that's just food for thought for all of us to keep in mind.
All right, Commissioner Ensberg?
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to add that as we're thinking about all of this, I sort of feel like we're making it harder than it really needs to be, because I do believe we have great bones. It's all right there. If we did a little spring cleaning, we could get a long ways. When I looked up the definition of a promenade, it says a place you walk for leisure, usually along a coastline. We have that on Cabrillo Boulevard, and that is where, you know, you would walk for leisure along the coastline. The State Street is much different than that to me. And I've always been imagining, and this again, this is the thing, everybody in this room has an idea, a really great idea, and a lot of them are different, and they're not the same, and so everybody's got a different thing. How do we bring everybody together around this? So where's the leadership from the top that's going to take all this information and then make it something beautiful like Anthony says it's going to be? We all know it's going to be. So State Street, maybe, I've always imagined like maybe the lower end, like from Cabrillo, which I know is not in there right now, but from Cabrillo up to, say, including the 500 block, maybe that's sort of a area that you walk, maybe that's sort of promenade-ish like. Then from there up to, say, the 1,000 block, that becomes quieter, which it is right now, and that becomes more infused with housing. But there are little shops and places you can shop and stuff, but it becomes a quieter area, maybe something like that. And then the upper area would be clearly the theater arts district, 10, 11, or 11 and 12 and 13. Sort of like what we have kind of now, but it is more of a block area. It's not a promenade, it's a district. So those are the things I would, that's been kind of rolling around in my head that I would like, let's get out the tracing paper, let's stop waving our arms around, and let's start getting some real stuff down on paper that we can all look at and say, oh, I like this about this one, and I like this about this one, and let's put those two things together. That's where I would like to get to, and I'd like to get all of the, I'll call it noise, of what we have going on right now, which is the interim, get that, you know, there's lots of problems created by what we have in the interim right now. So let's just clean that up, put it back, and let's focus on what are all these ideas, what do they look like, what are the pros and cons, and let's boil it down to something that we as a community would all come together around. I just throw that out for further discussion.
It's really complicated.
Really?
Well,
Oh.
yeah.
So just to play devil's advocate a little bit, to the comments that were just made, you know, I do understand that there are a lot of concerns and that there are now new issues that we have to address with the changes that have happened at State Street. But I do think that we've made progress in a way that has made it more of a destination for people, and that it now is allowing businesses at least to really embrace that kind of outdoor lifestyle that we all love. So I see that as a huge opportunity. I think we've made progress in the face of, you know, a major pandemic, and that's resulted to where we are today. That creates an opportunity for us to really build on that. I don't feel like we should go backwards. I think we should go forwards of, we've closed these blocks. I would say that the majority of residents that I speak with are very excited about it and are happy that we've made that step. I think that the exciting ideas of having, you know, more art infused into our experience, having more public safe spaces that do not require you to spend money at, right? Just like you could bring up your, you know, lunchbox to go. I think those are important steps, and I think having those closures are critical to like facilitating that. So to me, we are where we are today. There's a lot of progress that's happened. How do we fix it to make it work for everybody, but really with an eye towards the future, right? Like, I think this concept of saying, like, well, we're going to take bikes away, you know, when you're looking at what Santa Monica did, that was a long time ago, and I think Santa Monica has a lot of problems. I view what we can do as way better than what Santa Monica did. Santa Barbara is the place that we have the most resources. We're one of the most beautiful communities. I think we can set the bar higher than these examples of other cities. And I think that given where we are in the time of, like, the year it is today, this is the moment where we plan for a future where bikes, pedestrians, everyone is there together, and it's on us to figure out how to do that. And that's what's really exciting, because there are no cities that are doing this in a really great way today, and that's why we can be that city to set that bar. It's going to take time, and we're going to have to do compromise and be thoughtful, but like, we have to figure out a way to encourage all of these folks to live, play, work together, because that's the way we're moving in towards of development already. So this needs to complement that broader goal.
Let me ask a question that might sort of tease some of this out, because as both of you were talking. And with what Mr. Davis had mentioned, which I think is very wise and right on in terms of needing to get through the noise of the current, which is a problem. However we get through that, we need to not let that slow or stop us from thinking about the bigger picture. It's kind of those two prongs of the fork, right? We got to kind of do both at the same time. But in this case, we're thinking about that long-term future. So I would ask what people think about what the closure of State Street has taught us that might be useful for the long-term thinking of the master plan. All right, throw it back out there. Yeah. Commissioner Lodge.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Mr. Chair. Well, it has taught us that it brings people back downtown, and that people like it. They like having the street closed. I'm going to change subject in a way. I'd like to see the parades be able to come back downtown. Nobody has mentioned that.
Parades.
And
Parades.
I think that what Commissioner House said about where the restaurants are in Europe, where the restaurants are up against the building, and then there's the center area where other things can happen. I think we should work in that direction, and possibly consider raising State Street so that it's all one level. You don't have this problem with having to, which would be helpful to disabled folks too. To raise the street is going to be done with De La Guerra Plaza. It's going to be made all one level. But yeah, the parades back downtown, that's that's been a feature of Santa Barbara since the 20s. Actually, before, the first Rose Parade was in Santa Barbara, before then.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
do we want to segue to parades? Sorry, Commissioner Drury. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I love Commissioner Lodge's idea. I think right now State Street is sort of in a either or not one way or the other, I should say. I'm trying to sort of figure out the term, but it's not landed on one idea. There's sort of a hermaphrodite project. And it's not a street, it's not a paseo, it's not a promenade. It's sort of an uneasy mix of all those things. I think something has to be, it has to be codified. What actually do we want? I think the idea of making State Street a level, like a rather long plaza, if you will. And I would like to see that kind of activity, a parade activity again on State Street. That I marched in all, I don't know how many Fiesta parades when I was a kid. So I think that the idea that we've got this wonderful space between the buildings, is plenty wide, building to building across the street. I think we need to make a decision. What exactly is it going to be? Is there going to be a shuttle? Are we going to allow bicycles? Is it going to be strictly pedestrians? Is it going to be wider sidewalks? No parklets? I think that would be. Now, I know the parklets are a response to the COVID emergency, and it probably saved a lot of businesses in terms of the restaurants. But they're I'll just say, they're not attractive, and they really block what you're talking about in terms of the quality of the architecture up and down State Street. So the tourists can't even see them from walking down the middle of the street, which is a lovely idea, but then you're looking through people dining at in these parklets, which are these blocky sort of pseudo buildings. So I think the idea of having you'd probably have to have some stormwater management pretty extensively underneath a flat plaza, but at least water runs downhill toward the ocean. I would like to see a statement made how accessible that could be in terms of what would happen to the retail, both restaurant and goods, if that's a viable alternative. I would like to see something like that. I would second Commissioner Lodge's idea. Thank you.
All right. Well, the question was, what have we learned from the closed down State Street COVID times that could be useful and good or thoughtful or bad and show. And I think we've talked about things like issues like the bikes, right? There's a lot of talk about putting bikes on State Street with everything, all the traffic. So that's an example of something that we've learned that's bad. But more people coming downtown, that's an example of more vibrancy. That's something that's good that's come out of it, and that could be useful for the master plan question. Then there was also there's two questions. What about the parades and part of that long-term thinking with it? So maybe let's stay on parades and what we've learned.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Well, I think that the parades have been decided by council for at least the interim that they won't be on State Street. And I think they made some good points at the council meeting about the fact that the parade organizers have worked really well, and where the parade, the Fiesta on Cabrillo, had some glitches and maybe wasn't, they're going to work on it to improve it. So I think we want to design State Street to handle a parade. It may not end up ever coming back there if Cabrillo, it becomes, just the superior site for it. And I think I like Commissioner Wardlow's first comments about State Street being family friendly. I think we need to go back to potentials and constraints based on perhaps what we're seeing now on State Street. And the potentials have been talked about. I think one of them is definitely perhaps some sort of trolley system or some sort of way to travel. The constraint of State Street right now is, I think, the curbs and gutters. I really do. I think that if it's going to be closed to vehicles and just open to pedestrians or pedestrians and bicycles, it needs to be one surface. And I think that has created, the curbs have been a constraint from a standpoint that you constantly have them and the bikes are down the middle and it's become a very chaotic situation. I think that there has to be more consideration to retail, which that's a big issue. They are struggling. There's lots of empty storefronts, and how we work with the owners of those buildings to repurpose them or to make them live workspaces or commercial below and residential above is important. And I think that there are some things that are going to have to go into the State Street Master Plan that give those people flexibility and some economy to actually develop their properties and help them to be successful and thrive.
So maybe as a question, brought for your comment and question to to MIG and to those as they go forward, part of that brings up the retail and what jumps to my mind is what was before, maybe just measuring vacancies till now. How have that changed? Because in a sense, we have more vitality, we have more people there than we had before, but how does that looks like it's, benefiting the restaurants, great. And if there's areas that we want more restaurants or less restaurants or whatever, I think that's part of that big picture master plan, is where you're going to put people to get those spaces activated in certain ways.
Yeah, and I think we need to, you're right about that, but I think we need to, and the retail it's not only that, it's the architecture of State Street, which is really quite beautiful, but right now is blocked by parklets and things. I think we need to get away from parklets. We need to think about the fact that everyone here has said Santa Barbara is where we want to be because we want to be outdoors. So outdoor dining is important, but not necessarily parklets. And I think that's how we have to think is, and I think the parklets are what's creating some obstacles to the retail. And I'll stop there.
Before we go to you, Commissioner Higgins, we have Vice Chair Bonderson that would like to make a comment.
Hi, everybody. I have had the pleasure of sitting over here just listening, and I'm going to chime in with perhaps a different point of view. Unfortunately, the reason I'm here on Zoom is because I have a medical condition that I currently cannot easily be indoors without a mask, and I certainly could not take off my mask in a restaurant to eat. And therefore, the conversation of outdoor dining strikes me extremely, extremely close to home. It's very personal to me. And I know we're not taking the stance that outdoor dining is off the table. However, I think that if we are considering parklets not being an attractive option, I think a very big consideration would be the exploration of what other options allow the expansion of dining outside of these restaurants. Parklets obviously allow cover from the sun and a little bit of an enclosure perhaps from people passing by and so on, which helps. But more importantly, we have to keep the consideration that there are a lot of people in our community who may not be able to enjoy dining if they had to go inside. I'm one of them. I just would not be able to go out and explore and enjoy. Hopefully my situation is temporary, but there are people whose situations are not. And I really feel like that needs to be a consideration when we are talking about inclusivity. And so if we are discussing the idea of an option to replace parklets, what option, what direction do we need to go to explore that? Perhaps that's something that we can add to the consultant's checklist. Also, let's not forget that expansion, that outdoor dining has kept a lot of our restaurants alive. And the reason that we are doing so well in that area tends to, be thanks to the parklets thus far. So whether or not that's on the good checklist or on the bad checklist, it's obviously, a positive thing as far as keeping the restaurants alive. The other topic I wanted to say that I might be alone on is because we've discussed the length. And of course, I'm very, very curious as well to know what other successful models look like. I can't remember who brought it up, but that would be a wonderful statistic to get from the consultants. But if the full length has the potential to be successful, I personally would love to see the entire length be a promenade. I am one of the people who would walk the entire 10 or 11 blocks back and forth. I do it often because outdoor experiences are really one of the few things I can do these days. So I would definitely love to see that. I also think that when we revitalize these blocks, they will bring retail, they will bring the desire to fill those vacancies. And a good example of that is the Funk Zone. The Funk Zone was not a desirable area until we put our focus on improving it, and now it's booming and every space is full, almost every space. And so I just really want to address the fact that prioritizing the ways that we can include as many types of individuals with their potential limitations, whether it's ADA accessibility, or other types of difficulty, and expand our attention and keep our attention on addressing every type of way that we can include the widest audience. That's not only going to help us bring people for the experience, but also set the groundwork, as I mentioned before, for housing as we have opportunities to approve new housing opportunities downtown, and certainly the last thing I wanted to add, which we haven't talked about today, but it does go hand in hand with our transportation and circulation models, is parking. From the Planning Commission side of things, we all know that there's a zero parking requirement nowadays, but we want to always remember that there are people driving in, whether they're tourists or locals that are driving in from areas that may not have public transportation connection. There may not be a bus line, or they may not be in a position where they can necessarily and conveniently take public transportation. And so those parking areas need to be a big part of the consideration, so that we don't exclude people who may not have the ability to come in on a bike or walk, or maybe coming from a farther distance, as well as people who would like to live downtown but have the need for a vehicle at a cost. They will be required to pay for that spot, but to make it available would be really important. Thank you so much. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonderson. And
Thank you.
one thing I wanted to add before I go to you, Commissioner Higgins, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here, is following Commissioner Wiscombe and Vice Chair Bonderson, I think for me, it's this challenge of falling back into the perspective of what currently exists. And I think something interesting in the couple of comments between my colleagues is building towards a State Street that is very attractive for businesses, rather than the reverse perspective of what do we do for the current tenants. Because I think if we build towards just being attractive to businesses in general, whether it's retail, restaurants, a wide variety of experiences, it's going to work for our current retailers. And I love the idea of exploring other outdoor dining options, because I think you're right. I think it's the outdoor dining that is attractive about the parklets. And I was just thinking about my perspective. I got really pigeonholed into the idea of parklets. That's for sure parklets, but there are other options. And I think there's a way to really build that into a manner where it complements the architecture and the experience going down State Street, rather than distract from it. And I will throw it over to Commissioner Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just at risk here of trying to seek some consensus with what I'm hearing, I will not be trying to make a motion, but I'm hearing from Commissioners Ensberg and Drury, and maybe these aren't your words, but this is what I am reacting to, and certainly Commissioner Wiscombe made mention of this, and Commissioner Lodge, is that the curb and gutter is a constraint, and parklets are part of the noise right now. And if there's a forward statement that can be woven into go forward from this point, it's that parklets as currently designed are not going to be part of the future. That might be a way to at least address some of the interference that Mr. Davis indicated as part of some of the obstacles, is some sort of foundational cornerstone of how this process works thereafter, because all of the things I heard from HLC commissioners about the architecture of State Street in this city that are being lost or interfered with by parklets, some of the hazards that the bicycles, pedestrians, and parklets don't necessarily all belong together is fundamental. And I think that sort of economically speaking, there's the cities right now reaching into a place of trying to achieve some sort of fairness with how to license or lease some of those areas. I just think that's a major mistake to try to perpetuate what we all think, at least what I'm hearing, is part of the noise at this point. So
unless it's the 10-foot tall stuff with plastic vinyl,
Right, right. Well,
And screw to 2x4s. Those are the best.
Eliminating the curb and gutter as a constraint gives us a much larger palette to work with for outdoor dining, and certainly accessibility. So, and yes, it just adds more opportunities for multimodal circulation.
Commissioner Lundbeck, and then Vice Chair House.
Thank you. I wanted to try to respond to your question. What has the closure of State Street taught us? And I'll get there in a minute. I think outdoor dining is very important. And I look at the outdoor dining on Cabrillo Boulevard at what was the Sambos restaurant. I don't know what it's called now. Chad. My gosh. Beautiful yellow umbrellas, people having a good time looking out at the ocean, whatever. Yeah, we can have outside dining without having structures that turn us away from the boulevard or whatever. So, number one, I think it's important. I think that what we have lost, or the closure of State Street has taught us, is that we ignored retail when we jumped in big on restaurants. We ignored retail. And if this paseo or whatever we want to call it is going to work, people want to walk down the street casually, not worry about where they're going to dine, but window shopping. They want to see what the bookstore window has, or the dress store window has, or the men's shoe store, heaven forbid if there was one in Santa Barbara, you know. But strolling and window shopping retail is important. And as an aside, we'll sit down and have a cup of coffee and a croissant or whatever. But I think we've got to correct what we lost 2.5 years ago. We've got to get retail back, and we should not be getting back office spaces on State Street. State Street's got to be retail, and a good example of that is El Paseo. I remember 10, 15 years ago, we used to go down. There was a restaurant in the garden of El Paseo, and there were shops, and you could go in and pick up a postage stamp or whatever. It was now restaurants are gone, retail is gone, and you got attorneys or politicians in there.
There's nothing wrong with either one, for the record.
If we're going to have a successful State Street, we've got to get retail back, and it's got to be available. You can't walk behind a parklet structure to find the retail. It's got to be there and visible.
And get rid of attorneys and politicians. Sorry, David. And Vice Chair House had something to go.
It just all seems so simple to me. Everybody seems to be describing the European model to me. You know, that the pavement's all at the same street, same level. The dining is against the buildings. We might have to change some codes as far as improvements in the public right-of-way, as far as awnings that project out further. But I think that can accommodate all of that. And before I so rudely cut off at the 2-minute mark before, I did want to acknowledge Commissioner Bonderson's comment about improving the transportation infrastructure if we're building more housing, et cetera, et cetera. I think that kind of has to come first and not as an afterthought. And so once again, I'd like to talk about, the trolley or whatever we call it system, which is like the spinal column, part of the central nervous system, that you don't have to walk 12 blocks to experience. You can experience an area, and then you can go up to the arts district, or if you have a disability, it's easy on, easy off. Maybe it's not the cutesy little trolleys we've had. Maybe it's something that accommodates getting on and off easily in a wheelchair or something. But I just have a vision that's very clear to me. And
so more Spain for Santa Barbara?
Yeah. And what I would like to say, what I have learned, from what we have so far, is that the bicycles and pedestrians don't work together. And there's a reason bikes and pedestrians aren't allowed on the freeway. They move at very different speeds. And as long as we have electric bikes, that can go 20 miles an hour, that's just not compatible with pedestrians. And I don't know that there's anything right now that would preclude a Harley Davidson from, it's not a car.
Only electric Harley Davidsons.
Yeah, electric one, but, you know, they're just not compatible. And, you know, I've heard, you know, I read comments on nextdoor.com, and some bicycle advocates will say that the pedestrians need to look where they're going. But, you know, pedestrians, tourists that come to town, they don't want to be worrying about, okay, can I cross here, whatever. You know, they need to amble and feel safe and comfortable. So that's why I say I just don't think they work together. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to follow up on both of those comments. I think design plays such a big role in compatibility and how things interact, especially when you have pedestrians and bikes and other modes of transportation. And I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think Commissioner Wardlow pointed this out. There's a real big opportunity to take a look at that and try and use design to integrate that into whatever downtown State Street looks like. And then the other piece is, I think flexibility is so key. If we think back for the last 40, 50 years in what retail has done over that time period, it has changed lightning fast. It is hard to anticipate what types of businesses are going to thrive in downtown for the next 30 to 50 years. And so having flexibility is going to be so important if we're talking about economic vitality, and then flexibility in the sense of accommodating different types of activities, whether it's parades or sort of events, modes of transportation, and to your point during the presentation, even times of the week. Maybe there are different types of activities or different types of uses dependent on what the demand is. So I think that is going to be a key theme throughout this process and how we address a lot of the challenges. And again, it goes back to what Mr. Davis said, is getting beyond recognizing the challenges we have now, because they're going to inform a lot of the decisions, but getting beyond current conditions and being able to imagine something a little different and bigger and better. And I have faith that we'll be able to do that.
Chair Grumbine?
Oh, sorry, we'll go,
somebody
I saw Commissioner Wardlow, and then we'll go Commissioner.
I just wanted to support, Commissioner Chair Escobedo's comments. I think that if we over-index on retail when we're looking at a 30 to 50-year plan, I don't know that that's the right approach. I think retail's changing in ways that are totally out of our control as Santa Barbara. So when we plan for 30 to 50-year idea, I really hope that we can emphasize the things that we know will, continue to be a drive, meaning outdoor dining will always be something that, is going to be attractive to people. And I think that should be one of our primary focuses, as opposed to something like retail, where that will change over the next decade, right? And it already has. And when retail changes, I think we should be looking at how do we utilize more experiential type opportunities. So, I know that there's like an axe throwing thing that came into downtown, right? Like that's bringing, different kinds of folks that want to actually come downtown and have an experience. So those are some types of uses that we should also consider and hope to attract as we think 30 to 50 years out. I really appreciate Commissioner Escobedo's comments on all this. I just feel very similarly.
Commissioner Ensberg?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add on to some of the things that have already been said, but just to underscore that I think we can have it all. Through design, it's very possible. I mean, our downtown, there's a little village in Italy that we visited called Greve, and it had a central, all the streets came to the downtown. That is the principle of the downtown, the European model, as was mentioned, that this is where we all come together. That's why the parade is important to happen at that location with those buildings as the backdrop. That's the power of the downtown. This little town had this main center, it was all cobble, and I had originally thought that all the curbs were removed, but I looked at closer pictures of it, and they actually have sort of a circular space around where all the shops are, and then all the streets come through that central space. And what they do is it changes throughout the day. Normally, you would just be able to drive through, but sometimes they have the farmer's market there. So they put up the bollards. I don't know if they have those drop bollards that automatically go down. But I think we can do all of this if this is what we want to do. I just think it's really, really important that regardless of our own particular patterns or habits, that we think about others and how other people are. Like, my mother's in a wheelchair. My husband's about ready to get a hip replacement. It's not possible for him to walk, 3 blocks. So we have to think of these other people, and how do we open it up for everyone that this is the public right-of-way, and how do we allow for this outdoor dining that we want? I think I see many spots where this can happen, and in a beautiful way. And I want to just close by saying, we do want retail, and we want smaller shops as we're developing this housing. If we can get these footprints to be smaller so that we can have shops, and these are shops not just like trinket shops, these are shops that you would go to on a regular basis, a bakery, a cheese shop, a butcher shop, a shoe store, where can we buy shoes? All of these things are part of our daily life that we need to provide spaces that will work so that the incredible people who live in this town can provide those services to all the rest of us. So I guess I'll stop with that, but just having an open mind about just not our own.
Sure, and to sort of play off of both your comments, there was a thought of which brings back to the Dave Davis still had the long hair from 1999. From the symposium that they put on, and one of my professors was actually at it. I found it afterwards, but I took his courses a couple, like maybe 5-10 years later. But he was out here for it, and there was a great quote that he said, and he was analyzing Paseo Nuevo, actually, interestingly at the time, which was the rage. Everyone was talking how great it was and everything. And he said that the merchant in analyzing sort of civic life and what the purpose of the city is to the people of the city, to the citizen, and what the merchant relationship was to that, and how it was in a way sort of a lifeblood of it, but it wasn't the entirety of it. It wasn't what the city was about. The city was actually about coming together for public good life, and that was part of the support structure for it. And he said that the one Paseo Nuevo, the city might be able to survive, but 2 would kill it. And interestingly, it actually was the thing that has died because of a change, because it is built, and when you look at Macy's, it's built as a big box store based on not a long-term thought, thinking about how city life is, but on a very short-term modern car model of the suburbs and going to the mall. And so it's very interesting that the mall is having the hardest time. Even though a very kind of Santa Barbara feel Paseo Mall is still having a hard time, and now we're looking at how to repurpose it. So I think that there actually is very much agreement in terms of building good traditional building types can actually last the test of time, whether they're a real retail shop or an axe-throwing, long, nice, perfect 120 foot. Yeah, that's right. After this, we're all going to axe throwing. But it's interesting because I think that our good traditional architecture actually has the best chance of being the most current in the long run. And then, so any other conversations? I think we're sort of coming to our end. Any other conversations we're thinking we need to have?
Mr. Chair?
All right. Yeah. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Then Commissioner Drury.
Just in terms of retail, it has changed, and it's never going to come back to the way that it was. And that is something that has to be kept in mind as we're looking further down the road. Thank you.
And Commissioner Drury?
Well, axe throwing on State Street sounds really a lot of fun.
Yeah. All
And
right.
also,
Chair, should we end on that?
Chair, Chair, can I just say one thing? One thing I told my husband when we first moved here, and he said that we'd never be able to afford a house. I just said, never say never. We never know what we're going to have. We have opportunities everywhere, and we have a very skilled and talented population here, and we can do anything we put our minds to.
Thank you for that. And before we close out, Vice Chair Bonderson wanted to give a quick comment.
Thank you so much. I wanted to just make sure that I echoed something that Commissioner Higgins mentioned earlier, that we don't have a lot of representation on either of our commissions or even in the public for the younger age groups, especially those who are in their 20s or perhaps under 21, not partying, not drinking age. And something that has come up a lot in the work that I do is the fact that there aren't enough activities for the age group that is not, or not even the age group, just people in general who may not be interested in drinking. So if we could also request from our consultants to really pay attention to the age group that is not represented regularly amongst us, and find activities that can be and should be aimed at not small children, not full-fledged, over 21-year-old adults, but anybody who is interested in being downtown, staying downtown, participating actively in our environment, whether it's indoors or outdoors. If they want to have a place to go and sit and have a coffee or hang out with friends without feeling like they have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to be allowed to stay. I know that that's something I worked with students for a very long time, international students actually, and they seem to be a demographic that might be missing. They are individuals who come for anywhere between 2 weeks and 5 years on a school visa, and they are renting rooms out. I don't believe they are necessarily being counted in our population when we're looking at who's renting rooms out of houses that are, owned or in other words, rented or owned by a family. They may not be actually toggling that marker when they say, yes, we're renting a room out to an international student. And those are the people who come here. They act as long-term tourists. They have money to spend. They want to be downtown. They don't come with vehicles, especially cars. They don't necessarily have endless opportunities to use an Uber. So we want to get them downtown. We want to keep them downtown. We want to have opportunities for them along with everyone else in that age group. So please take that into consideration when you're planning those activities, those age-appropriate, inclusive activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonderson. And I think we're pretty much done. I just wanted to thank staff and our consultant for an excellent meeting. And thank our colleagues from Historic Landmarks Commission. This was really fun. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, this is the most fun meeting with planning commissioners ever.
I'm sure the bar was... we are adjourned at 12:26.